I really wanted to love Cuckoo. It has all the makings of a classic horror movie, and it was highly recommended by some of my favorite YouTubers, but it just didn't fully work for me. I still enjoyed my time watching it, and I gave it 3 stars for Dan Stevens' German accent and Hunter Schafer alone, but I felt like this movie came up short in delivering on a fantastic premise. And honestly, it made me appreciate how difficult it is to make a classic movie in the first place because this has all the right pieces, but it just didn't click together. And so before we go any further, let me say this is a spoiler warning. I'm going to talk about what did and didn't work for me in Cuckoo, and even though I didn't absolutely love this movie, I'd still tell you to go watch it before finishing this video because it's definitely worth your time. And while you're at it, make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you can keep up with all my upcoming reviews. Okay, so the first thing I want to say about Cuckoo is the setting and cinematography in this movie is perfect. I always love horror movies that take place in the mountains because it gives you such an isolated, creepy feeling. And we have so many Appalachia horror movies that usually involve the Wendigo in one form or another. And while I love that stuff, I was really excited to see a new mountain range represented in the German Alps. This rustic environment and dense forest leaves you feeling totally disconnected from the outside world. So when shit starts getting spooky, there's no civilization to run to. Hunter Schafer riding her bike alone at night would be a lot less terrifying and unsettling in the city or the suburbs, but because she's in the middle of absolutely nowhere, this scene is a lot more tense. And so placing this movie in the Alps was a great idea, and the cinematography by Paul Fouts deserves a huge shout out. Cuckoo is a colorful and bright movie with the saturation turned up. They shot this entirely on 35mm film, so there's a chromatic, grainy vibe to it that I personally think every horror movie should try to have. I think we're seeing directors and cinematographers move away from the ultra realism and back to more stylistic filmmaking, and the horror genre should benefit from that more than anyone else. You don't want a horror movie to feel too polished or clean. It should feel like you're watching something you're not really supposed to. Everyone uses the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre as an example of this, and honestly, it's true. That movie is a classic for many reasons, but in large part because of the grimy way that it was filmed. I'm not saying every single horror movie has to be shot on film, but I do think this style creates a better atmosphere for stories that are supposed to be scary or unsettling. And so the look and feel of Cuckoo is one of its biggest strengths. The other two strengths are named Dan and Hunter. Listen, we're in the golden era of Dan Stevens horror movies, and I'm very excited to see what he has planned in 2025. But in 2024, he was playing a weird little German man, and it was great. His character's dropping ominous hints and lines every time he's on screen. I love how weird and off-putting he is, basically in every conversation. Dan just oozes this fake nice energy that has you on edge all the time, wondering what he's really thinking. Because his smile and line delivery just lets you know that there's something hidden behind everything he's telling you. And at no point do you feel like you can trust this man at all. As for Hunter Schafer, she is awesome as the lead. I didn't really think her character had all that much to work with outside of a few emotional cliches, but even so, Hunter knocked it out the park. This script called for her to be battered and beat up both physically and emotionally throughout the movie, and she blended this wounded warrior persona with an emotional vulnerability that I really enjoyed. Some of the moments between her and her dad were really well done. It's made very clear that her dad would rather move on and focus on his new family rather than deal with the daughter who he would consider the black sheep of his old family, and the new stepmom being even more cold and distant just added to the tension and isolation that you feel in this movie. The only person in her family who might be able to offer her some compassion is this little girl who literally cannot talk. So you feel totally trapped, and again, the isolation in this movie is one of its biggest strengths. From there, I don't have much else about the film that I really loved. I think the premise of a cuckoo, human-like creature was really interesting. This ancient species that is almost human but not quite could have been really scary if done differently, because for me, I just kinda didn't find this lady scary at all. She just looked like an angry, middle-aged white woman. Like, I felt like I was watching one of those Karen freakout videos. And I get that this creature is supposed to be a human-adjacent species, but I think they look a little too human. Like they could have made it look a bit different to make her scarier in my opinion, but I think I'm in the minority on this one because I've seen people in reviews who rave and love this creature design. They say it's one of the most effective scary movies they've seen in a while, and so I'm happy if it worked for you, but it just didn't really work for me. The other thing that missed the mark in my opinion with this movie was the overall mystery and tension. I found the way this story unfolds to be a little too disjointed and incoherent to follow. I don't necessarily need a movie to spell itself out for me step by step, because a psychological thriller should confuse you and leave you wondering what the hell is happening from time to time, but Cuckoo for me is told in a way that felt so out of the loop that no reveal would have felt satisfying because I simply couldn't tell what I was watching for most of the runtime. Like this movie was missing a few setups and payoffs that make a mystery worth following. And that's not to say Cuckoo doesn't have any foreshadowing or clues to lead you along. On a rewatch, you'll see how Dan Stevens tips his hand multiple times throughout the film, and if you know anything about cuckoo birds entering this, then you probably already know what direction you're headed in. And so it all makes sense once you see the movie and get the final exposition dump, but there aren't enough breadcrumbs along the way to get you there on your own on the first watch. And again, that's fine. A movie doesn't have to give you a mystery that's solvable on your own. I'm not arguing that Cuckoo or any other movie should follow a cookie cutter formula by any means. I'm simply saying I personally didn't enjoy the ride because I couldn't see where it was taking me. And not even in a wild, oh my god, this is so crazy, where is this story gonna go type of way, but more of this feels like chunks of the story have been left out and I'm not sure what this is building to. And when we got to the final reveal, I was a little underwhelmed. And then my other core issue with the mystery is you have this great setting and you do such a good job of setting up the physical and emotional isolation of our main character, but then the movie flirts with this idea that maybe Hunter Schafer isn't actually seeing what we think she's seeing, when I never for a second doubted that some crazy shit was going on from the moment this movie started. Some of the most effective psychological thrillers will make you question the narrator or wonder if the main character is having some sort of psychosis, and that inherent tension makes the mystery more suspenseful because you're not sure who to trust. But in Cuckoo, you knew right away that Hunter couldn't really trust anybody, and if there was supposed to be a meaningful red herring, then I didn't see it. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but again, movies like Cuckoo don't need to follow a formula with a red herring or unreliable narrator, but certain scenes in this movie made it feel like the intention was for you to question what you're seeing, and I didn't get that at all. But overall, the movie was still exciting enough to keep me engaged. I wasn't dreading my time or wondering when it would end. Cuckoo is beautifully shot and carried on the backs of two strong performances that make it worth the watch. The last minor complaint I have is the time loop effect that we see whenever the cuckoo creature makes that noise. I know the film was trying to convey how disorienting this noise is supposed to be for the characters, but I found myself getting annoyed by the multiple 10-second time loops that we get trapped in. Like I got the point after the first couple loops, and then each one continues for a few beats longer than I needed it to. But anyways, that's just a small thing I wanted to mention because I was curious if anyone else felt that way or if my attention span is really just that cooked. And that's all I have on Cuckoo. Like I said, this movie is still a fun watch, and I'll definitely end up watching it again at some point. If you've seen this movie and you agree or disagree with me, then please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed my review, then I hope you will drop a like and hit the subscribe button. I'm still working to get this channel off the ground, so any support is very much appreciated. And with all that said, I'll see you next time.